Well, I'm really excited about today because tomorrow we get to start, so it's one day closer, and I've appreciated a bunch what the kids did this summer, and along with Ross Galagi and our strength staff, and we're looking forward to getting going tomorrow. And it was good to have everyone show up here today and ready to go. Last week, a lot of them were finishing up some of the summer school classes, and some were able to get home for a little bit. So it truly feels like the start of, our fourth phase, before you play the season. And it was, winter conditioning is one, spring ball, summer, and then fall camp. And so enjoy continuing to get to know this group. And, we added 30-some freshmen to it, and I thought they've assimilated well with the upperclassmen. And so today, kind of have some meetings and do a lot of the media and the family fun day. But tomorrow we get to get going, and I think everyone's really ready to do that and excited to do that. As far as injuries, T.J. Edwards is the only one that I don't know when he'll be able to, if he does anything in camp. And then we've got a handful of guys that are coming off of whether it's a surgery, like Dakota had and Dan Volz had, or some things where they're just limited. But so right now we're fairly healthy, aside from TJ, and he's progressing and don't quite know when he'll be ready. But he'd be the only guy that I think may not do much in camp physically. So, but excited to get going and appreciate this group. And I think training camp is going to be big for this team, big for a number of individuals, and certainly some position battles, most notably the quarterback. But I think it's safety, and I think kind of defining at the receiver spot, and then there's other positions that I think we're looking at building some depth. So it's the fun part about fall camp. It actually will go fast, and so we've got to maximize each day, each opportunity.
We've got microphones on each side.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Paul, you mentioned
Opted for the out.
you mentioned Dan Volz. Are you expecting him to be healthy enough to play in the opener? And if so, right now, do you think center or guard for him?
Well, I'll answer the second part first, in that, obviously Dan's played a lot of center, but, Michael's also done a lot at center, and I think that most years we've gone through it, and you end up, wanting to have two or three centers. So, Michael will start at center, and Dan will end up doing both, and it'll be determined how practices go for him. Dan's coming off of, what was a season-ending injury last year, and he's done a ton of stuff and worked at it, and yet we are going to be more cautious than pushing him. What I appreciate from Dan is that he is smart and he cares and he works at it. So the number of reps that he will need would be different than, let's say, a younger guy. So I think, Dan and like I said, Dakota, there's a couple guys that we just got to see how they respond. Now, they've been doing some, obviously, work in the summer, but it's the first time guys are doing football. And so how does that affect them? We'll be smart, and we'll be, careful. All the players want to go. It's not that's what I appreciate about the group. You're not trying to push them. You're just trying to make sure you're smart and they're ready to go. So I don't know that answer.
In regards to that, with what happened to Corey last year, how much playing time does he need in the fall, especially coming off the injury, but he's been here for so long?
Well, I think Corey needs work, and just because he's played in some games, he didn't play a ton last year, and I don't think anyone on offense is masters of the system yet. And so I think that he, along with everyone really on our team, needs to work. Defensively, there's some adjustments, obviously, with a new scheme. And we're doing a lot of things that play off of what they've been doing. But I think everyone's going to need to work. And they get that, and that's what I like about the group is that we've got a lot to accomplish in fall camp. And Corey is right in the middle of that. He needs the work. And, he had that sense. We weren't sure how much we get out of him in spring, as he was coming back. And he was anxious, and he knows that he needs to get that work. So that's what, again, I like about the group is they know that we got to work.
You mentioned the receiver battle. Just based off some of the things they did last season and then in spring ball, what are your expectations from Wheelwright and Peavy maybe kind of taking over those 2 lead spots?
Yeah, certainly, both Jazz and Rob played a lot last year. And Rob's, I think one thing that he's got to try to do is be healthy. And I don't think he's ever gone through a spring ball or a fall camp. And there's a couple guys, Rob being one of them, that we're going to do some things to try to make sure that they get through camp. And I thought Jazz really, it was fun for me to see Jazz where he was last spring and the work that he put in and how he's grown. And I thought that he did a heck of a job last year, probably much more as a complimentary receiver. And he's got an opportunity now to step into another role. And, with Alex leaving, Rob and Jazz and Reggie are the 3 that have some experience. But we've got a group of guys. We've got, George Rushing's the guy that's, been around the program, and it's time for him to step up and into a more significant role. And I think we got some young guys as well. So that'll be a big part of this fall camp is how does that position play itself out.
Phil?
In assessing your quarterbacks from how you do it in the spring to the fall, could you talk about the difference between those two and then what you value day to day, for that winning quarterback to earn that job?
I think that spring is much more individual specific. I think you can kind of make more mistakes, and you kind of want them to push the envelope. And yet I'm hesitating a little bit because I don't want to ever zap that. You're continuing to learn. You don't get to a point and you're good. I mean, if all the quarterbacks have had, you hope you're continuing to learn throughout the season. I think that there's more, we should be tighter around it, with the receivers and offensively that you can gauge the quarterback, do they move the team or not? I think that's a big part of the evaluation. But the bottom line is we got to get both Bart and Alex ready to play because one will be the starter and one will be one play away from being that guy. So I think there's a little bit more liberties in the spring, but I think you got to be careful of trying to make them in fall play where they try to play perfect or play safe because I don't think you grow. And every one of the players that we got on this team needs to continue to grow, and our job to help them grow. And you don't grow unless you get out of your comfort zone, and so you've got to be able to do that. But I think that there is also a real component as the quarterback move the team, and how the players respond to them. And that's why I thought both did a great job this summer, and I think our team respects both of them, and they know that both Alex and Bart care about this team and will do anything for it. And they're both competitive, and so I like where they're starting at, and really am looking forward to working with them here in fall camp. And like I said, really for me, the bottom line is that we get them both ready to play.
Coach, just to backtrack on Corey, I'm kind of curious where he is mentally after last year and what kind of discussions do you have with a player like him to get him prepared for his final season?
Well, you have a lot of discussions with the players, and I thought that one thing I've thought with Corey is that he's taken what he went through last year and has tried to learn from it, and then try to apply it. Then you got to put that into action and applying it. And we were just talking about that with quarterbacks. How you got to get out of here. You got to learn, and sometimes you learn by making mistakes. And you know what? That was Corey last year. Some of it on the field with injuries, and some of it off the field. And I think that he's taken all that to heart, and he wants to be the best player he can be, but also the best person he can be. And I think he values this team, and he wants to be a good teammate. And I also believe that Corey knows that part of him being a good teammate is being there. We can depend on him. I think he's a guy that feels like we're a better team with him playing. And so I've liked where he's at. And you know what? He's going to have new challenges that come up. And, you got to continue to grow and work through them. But I think last year is not a year that he would want to script out. But I think he's tried to learn from it. And I appreciate that about him.
Your team always seems to have pretty seamless transitions in leadership on both sides of the ball as guys come out and guys move up in the offense and defense. Is that something that just kind of happens naturally, or do you kind of push certain players towards that as you kind of go along throughout the summer?
Well, I think nothing just happens. I think that everything that goes on, takes people. And, we've been fortunate that, since the time I've been here at Wisconsin, that we've had upperclassmen that reach out to younger kids and try to teach them, show them the way. And then I think there's a natural evolution that occurs when, positions, roles, people graduate and they have to be filled. People have to step up. And so I think that, it doesn't just happen. Guys actively work to make those transitions, but nothing just happens. It's people making it happen. That's why you appreciate it when they do that, and that's a fun part of each year. Is that I thought we struggled through that last year. That guys that played a lot of football were embracing new roles. I thought. Joel was an example. Joel played a lot of games, but he had to be a different type of quarterback last year. And, I think Vince is going to face that this year. Vince has played a lot of football, but now he's going to have a new role. And Sojourn's got a new role. And T.J. Watt's going to have a new role. Guys that we've all seen and watched him play, but it's never ending, and it's always moving on. That's one of the fun parts about this job.
Paul, why'd you end up moving David Edwards to tackle, and outside of the top three at tight end, Troy, Eric, and Kyle, who else do you see maybe contributing this year at that position?
You thought that for David, it might be the best position for him, and I think it's an area that we certainly want to and need to have depth. I don't think any position move, you do it for two things, but I think they both have to be part of it, and that's, is it right for the individual, and is it good for the team? And if it's good for the individual and good for the team, then you do it. So we thought it was going to be good for David and good for our team. And as far as the depth at the tight end position, Fooms played a lot of football, and I think he's a guy that's got to step into a new role. Eric Steffes has been around. If we can keep him, healthy, I think he can add something to it. And Peniston's, I think, a talented young player that's got to grow up. And then we've got some other younger players with it. And, we've also gone some years where we've played, Billy Nagy's senior year, he played some tight end. We'll find roles for guys, and if they've earned them, we'll get them on the field.
Tom.
Of all the things you have to get accomplished here, where does getting the running game back to Wisconsin normal, rank? And did the trials and tribulations of last year help you with the ingredient? And do you now have the ingredients to do that?
I think it's really important that we get the running game going in the right direction, and I thought that we certainly finished last year with that. I wasn't here for a few years, but Coach Settle talks all the time about the standard is the standard, and fortunately, if you talk about Wisconsin and the running game, that standard's been really high, unusually so. But that's the standard, and I think that we will. I've liked what the guys have done, in the offensive line and the tight ends and the, running backs. I think they've taken it to heart and know that we got to be better. That'll help our team, and so I like what they're doing. We know what we got to accomplish, and that's we got to be better. I didn't think we could consistently run the football against everyone like we wanted to, and that's what we're striving to do. And the one thing is, with a lot of guys gained valuable experience last year, and I think that they'll be better because of that. But we've got a lot of work to do.
Along those lines, how much did that experience, because you had question marks about that O-line going into camp last year, how much did that experience, how much more comfortable are you now with the depth that you have there and the experience that they got?
We're building the depth. We've got a lot of, this is not a veteran line. We spent some time talking about Dan Volts, and he's played the most football. And how much can we get out of my camp? And Michael Dieter is one guy that started every game, and that was as a redshirt freshman, which is hats off to him. That's hard to do what he did. Bo Benchwall and Max, started a handful of games each. We're excited, really excited about Ryan Ramczyk, and he's yet to play in a Division I football game. And John Dietzen, we're excited about. He's never played in a Division I football game. Mike Capoy's played some games. We're talked about David Edwards moving over to tackle. We think we're building it, and that's exciting. And what I appreciate is the kids are doing everything we're asking them to do, and that's our job to help them be the best they can be. And O-line plays kind of like what we're talking about with the running game. The standards, it's a high standard. And I get excited about what this line could be, but we have not arrived yet, and they know that, we know that, and that's the fun part. We get to go work on it.
Jeff.
Paul, you mentioned Ramczyk, who had to come in, transfer, sit out a year, and do a lot of things to be in the position he is today. A couple other kids, Nick Nelson coming from Hawaii, and James, who you coached at Pitt. What do those guys have to do off the field this year and in practice to prepare themselves? And especially about James, what can you tell us about what you liked about him when you had him the first time?
With Chryst, thought he obviously was a talented player, and then as we got to know him in the recruiting process, liked who he was as a person, competitive, and he was actually interested in trying to transfer last year, and we were trying to encourage just see how it goes, and Nick Nelson, Durante had coached him, and so we felt like we knew who they are, and I think this year they can. It's not always easy, but I thought Ram did a great job last year of maximizing the opportunity. And just because they're not playing on Saturdays, you got all that practice time, and I think you can focus on the weight room. You're not going to play in Saturday's game, so you can be sore on Friday. So I think there's some growth in, Nick and Chris. They're young, and so they can still develop. So I think they can maximize or need to maximize, and we got to help them. But there's a lot of growth that can happen, and I think too that your practices can be better. I remember Shobes and Vince talking about Ryan, and saying that the best tackle we might have played is who we see Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And so if you're approaching those days, it helps the player that we're talking about, Ryan last year and Chryst and Nick, but really Nick should be able to challenge Rob and Jazz during practice to where they're getting better. So hopefully, we just all have to elevate, and I think practices have to be competitive, and when you do compete and when you put yourself out there, I think growth can occur, and that's what we got to strive for. So I think that even though they're not playing games, it can be big, really good years for them.
I know we were talking about Ryan. He's not proven on the Division I level, and I know you've talked about that. But already the starter going into spring, that says a lot about what he brings to you guys. Not a knock on D2, but do you feel like he was overlooked in the recruiting process way back?
By some, maybe. We were, I was myself and Bob Bosa was the line coach at the time, and Rudy was the tight ends coach, and we were recruiting him here, and then we all left and went to Pittsburgh, and we offered him out there. I'm glad he didn't say yes to it. So I don't, but he didn't have a ton of scholarships, so I don't know. But he wasn't, we've known who he is for a long time, and that's why I'm excited on another level too, to see this come to fruition. And you know what? He did a great job, at Stevens Point in Division III, and I'm glad he's made the change, and he's worked his tail off to get there. And you could go down. There's a lot of guys that the recruiting doesn't match the career, right? And that's the beautiful thing about this all, is that none of this just happens. Guys work at it and put themselves in position, and they get an opportunity, and they take advantage of the opportunity. And I think Ryan's been doing that, and I'm excited to see how that plays out.
With Coach Wilcox coming in, obviously it's different terminology and a different guy at the top, but it is also a similar scheme that he ran at USC coming here. So how long do you think it takes for a lot of your defensive players to start to get comfortable in this? Is that something you can kind of get through in fall camp, or is it going to take a few games in the season before guys really feel like they don't have to think out there as much and they can just react?
I think it's as much, once again, it's individual. Regardless, we were going to have guys that were stepping into a new role or stepping into a new position. They were going to think they weren't going to trust themselves as much, and that takes time. A lot of the terminology has stayed the same. Some's a little bit different, and that was going to happen regardless. And so I think that it's, it's our job to make sure they get it and they feel comfortable. And once again, though, I think you're still. It's always evolving. The learning and the growth is always evolving. So I sure hope it doesn't stop at the end of fall camp. And, for the season we're good. But I think that, I think all the people involved, Justin, the defensive coaching staff, the players, they've made it to where it's been a good transition. But it is a transition. In transitions, we talked about this earlier today, that transitions are part of, I think you asked the question. I'm getting the theme of what you're kind of attacking. That's part of life, and how do you adjust to it? And so we could have the same staff and all that. It's always evolving.
Well, it seems like the first thing anybody says about Wisconsin this year is the brutal schedule that you're facing. What are your thoughts on it, and how is it because it's so prevalent out there in the public? Is it something you have to really address with your team and really keep your thumb on it?
Yeah, I think you always want to address the schedule with your players, and they do it at different times, because this year they could be talking about how hard it is, and maybe previous years, you should win these games X, Y, and Z, and so I think you're always wanting to talk to them, and yet I have gotten energy from our kids, and that this is why they came to Wisconsin. When they were getting recruited, is when Vince Beagle was getting recruited. That's when we played Michigan State in the Big Ten championship game, and so they pictured, that year we played Michigan State, and we played Ohio State, we played Michigan. When you think of playing in the Big Ten, those are teams you think about playing, and certainly every year now, I think Nebraska's been in the league long enough where that's truly been a big part of it for these kids. That is the Big Ten, Big Ten West, and Iowa. And so our kids are excited about it, and I'm excited about it. And the schedule every year, it's it comes out, and those are opportunities, and what we do with those opportunities, it's on us. And I think that's the beauty of it. And so we've got, I think your good established players love playing against the best, and I think your younger kids, they have a chance to grow up and to know what it means. And so I know that we are all inside the building, we're all excited about it, and so but we're also going to spend time on the ones that not everyone's talking about. Those games are going to be huge for us too.
Paul, back to Wilcox for a second. You talked about that transition, but there's a transition from his end because he obviously had to learn these guys in the spring. How much growth does he have, or how much of a road does he have to travel yet to know what he can do with certain schemes and his personnel?
I think that's one of the things I've liked about Justin, is that a big part of what he's trying to do is make sure he knows, what can Sojourn do? What can Vince do? What can Connor Sheehy and Cheekway and Alec do? And then he'll adjust the schemes off of the players. And, very similar approach to, it's what I believe in. And so I think that's where we were able to hit it off, is that, and again, I think he'll continue to, I know I go through that, where you continue to find out who they are, and it's once something happens, might be in a game, might be in a practice, week 7. Geez, he can do that, or he's finally ready. I mean, you might be working and kind of steering a kid towards that, and yet it's really not ready, because that's bad coaching if you put a kid in a position that he's not ready for yet. But if they are, and so Justin thinks that way. So you're right, Jeff. There's a ton of, you're always gaining knowledge, right? And how much can Vince handle? How much can the defensive backs handle? And so I think you're constantly evolving. But I think when you've got the approach and you recognize that, you have a tendency to do a better job. You're at least cognizant of it.
Probably got time for one or two more, Zach.
Paul, I know they haven't been on the field yet. The true freshmen haven't stepped on the field for practice, but is there a position group that maybe you'll need them to help you this year?
I mean, I think we're looking for everyone to help us. I think that there's a naturally certain positions that might be easier to play at an earlier age, and I think that can be some of your skill positions. I don't think running back, I think we might have a decent depth, but I think the receiver position, I think the defensive backfield position are areas where, and it's a combination of the kids that we have and the amount of work that they can get. There's, whether it's because of low numbers or whatnot, we're excited about the young offensive linemen we have. Now, we haven't been on the field with them, like you said, in football, but will 1, 2 be in the depth? We're anxious to find that out, but certainly are excited about that group. But it's a different position. I think if you're on offense, it'd be easier to maybe impact it at receiver at a young age. Doesn't mean they're a better player or a worse player, but I think that some of those skill spots, it's a little bit easier.
You mentioned guys whose recruiting didn't match their careers. Jim Leonard was certainly one of those guys when he played here. What do you hope he brings to the staff?
Well, I know what he's already brought, and that's he's a great teacher and has a knowledgeable and wonderful perspective on this place. And what I hope he does is impacts our players and impacts our coaches. And I know that he already has, and so I'm really confident that he'll continue to do that. And Jim is a special person, and feel fortunate to be working with him.
We'll take one more, Ryan.
Coach, did you talk to Rafael and the rest of the specialists? Have you talked to them after the tragedy with Michigan State, Nebraska, and where their mindset is at?
Yeah, we've had conversations, and truly tragic. And we had a number of guys that were right. They're at the event. They were driving to Drew Meyer's house, and so it hits home, and you want to be there for them, and teammates want to be there for them, and I think that you're continuing to do that. It's not just over. It's not done. We didn't handle it. We talked. We're good. And so I think you just and that's a big part of what we get to do as coaches is all these kids. We've had you get 100 and some players. There's going to be off the field occurrences that impact these kids, and that's, I think, is as much of our job as teaching them how to double team, block on a defender, or stop a post route. And that's the it truly is a tragedy, and how do you help your kids through it? You try to do it the best you can.